Hello friends, welcome to the Unholy Script. They say you can look into a person's eyes and see their soul. But the truth is, sometimes the eyes lie. A smile can hide cruelty, and a calm face can mask a storm brewing deep inside. We live surrounded by people, yet we rarely know what they're truly capable of. Every person carries a secret, some harmless, others dark enough to haunt generations. Today's story is one of those secrets. A story buried in the quiet villages of Romania, where more than a century ago, a woman lived behind an innocent face, a woman whose name became a legend whispered in fear. Her name was Baba Anujka. But before history called her a witch, before her name became a warning, she was just a curious little girl named Ana de Piston, bright, intelligent, born into comfort and privilege. Nobody could have guessed that the same hands once trained in science and healing would one day be linked to over 100 mysterious deaths. To understand Baba Anujka, we have to go back to the 1800s, when the world was simpler yet crueler. Medicine was rare, hospitals were few, and people turned to local healers, men and women who mixed herbs, oils, and potions, promising to cure the incurable. Among them, Anna would grow into someone extraordinary. But her mind, brilliant as it was, would slowly twist into something dangerous. Imagine Romania in those days. Endless fields, horse-drawn carts, stone houses scattered across fog-covered villages. Life moved at a slower rhythm. There was no electricity, no noise of cars, just the sound of footsteps on cobblestone and the whispers of secrets carried by the wind. And in one of those quiet corners of the world, a girl was growing up, fascinated not by dolls or dresses, but by chemistry and physics, the invisible forces that made the world move. Her teachers praised her intelligence. Her parents adored her. She could speak 5 languages, and her manners reflected the upbringing of a wealthy household. Yet, behind the intelligence was an obsession, a desire to control life itself. Maybe she didn't know it then, but the same curiosity that made her experiment with herbs and minerals would one day lead her down a path of deception and death. There's a saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. For Ana de Piston, that road began innocently enough, a fascination with healing, with helping others. But in a world filled with superstition, that curiosity became power. Power that others began to fear. And eventually, power that she began to abuse. So today, as we open this chilling chapter of history, remember, monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they wear the face of an old lady offering help, or a healer mixing potions in the name of medicine. And that is how the legend of Baba Anujka, the witch of Vladimirovac, truly begins. To understand who Baba Anujka became, we must first return to where she began, to the quiet, cobblestone streets of Pančevo, a town tucked within the borders of what was then Romania. The year was 1838, and into a world of privilege and prestige, a girl named Ana de Piston was born. Defana's family was wealthy, the kind of wealth that built tall iron gates and marble-floored homes. Her father was a respected businessman, and her mother came from a line of educated women. From the moment Ana was old enough to speak, her parents noticed something unusual about her, a spark of brilliance, a mind that absorbed everything around her like a sponge. All text. While other children played in the fields or chased each other through the orchards, Ana spent her time asking questions. She wanted to know why things happened, how they worked. What made the stars shine? Why did one leaf grow greener than another? And most of all, what secrets were hidden inside the bottles and jars that lined the shelves of her father's study? By the time she was 10, Ana could already read books meant for university students. Her parents, recognizing her potential, enrolled her in one of the finest private schools in the region, a school meant for the children of noblemen and landowners. In those candle-lit classrooms, Ana found her true fascination: science. While most girls were trained to sew or play piano, Ana was drawn to chemistry and physics, subjects considered unsuitable for women at the time. But she didn't care. She loved the clinking of glass, the smell of chemicals, the thrill of discovery. It was in those moments that Aina felt alive, as if the universe itself was whispering its secrets only to her. She was gifted, frighteningly gifted. She could speak 5 languages, solve complex equations, and understand the delicate balance between creation and destruction. But with genius often comes isolation. Her intelligence made her different, distant, almost untouchable. Even as a child, she had the presence of someone far older, calm, observant, calculating. As she grew into adulthood, the small-town girl transformed into a poised young woman. She carried herself with quiet confidence, always dressed modestly, but with an air of command that drew attention wherever she went. People admired her grace, her intellect, her curiosity. But there was something else, something they couldn't quite define, a certain coldness behind her polite smile, as if her mind was always somewhere else, lost in its own experiments. At this point, Aina's future seemed bright. With her intelligence and charm, she could have become a teacher, a scientist, or even a scholar. But fate had a darker design waiting for her. Because deep down, behind the brilliance and ambition, Anna de Piston carried a silent obsession, not just to understand life, but to control it. She was fascinated by how a few drops of one liquid could heal or harm. And that fascination, innocent as it seemed, was the first shadow that crept into her story, a shadow that would one day swallow her completely. As the years passed, Aina de Piston grew into a young woman of remarkable beauty and intellect. Her reputation spread far beyond her hometown. Not only was she educated and articulate, but she carried a quiet confidence that made her seem older than her years. In a time when women were expected to marry young and settle into domestic life, Aina's independence was both admired and questioned. Yet, as fate would have it, love, or perhaps opportunity, came knocking in the form of a wealthy landowner from a Serbian village called Vladimirovac. He was much older than her, a man of means and status. His vast estate stretched across fields of wheat and vineyards that shimmered under the Balkan sun. To many, the marriage seemed ideal, a union that would secure Aina's future and strengthen both families' names. But for Aina, the arrangement was less about affection and more about stability. Her husband offered her comfort, luxury, and security, but not companionship. Their relationship was one of polite distance, 2 people bound more by circumstance than by love. Still, Aina fulfilled her role with grace. She became a wife, a homemaker, and eventually, a mother to 11 children. The grand house echoed with the laughter of babies and the steady rhythm of daily life. To the villagers, she seemed blessed, a woman who had everything one could wish for. Yet inside, Aina felt something else, an ache that success and wealth could not soothe. The brilliance that had once fueled her studies now sat dormant, buried beneath chores and expectations. Her heart longed for discovery again, for the scent of chemicals, the thrill of an experiment, the rush of creation. Then, after 20 years of marriage, her husband passed away. He died an old man, leaving behind his estate, his children, and a widow still in her prime. For most, widowhood brought sorrow. But for Aina, it brought something different, freedom. In the quiet that followed his death, Aina felt the old hunger return. She withdrew from social life, spending long nights alone in her home, her mind restless. She began to read again, old notebooks, chemical texts, remedies from herbalists. Slowly, she started experimenting, mixing herbs and extracts in small glass bottles. What began as curiosity soon grew into a passion. She turned her room in her house into a makeshift laboratory, filled with jars, beakers, and the faint, sharp smell of tinctures. The villagers began to notice. When word spread that the widow of Vladimirovac was preparing healing potions and herbal remedies, they came to her door seeking help. Hospitals were rare in those times, and doctors even rarer. So people placed their faith in local healers, and Aina, with her knowledge and calm authority, became known as Baba Anujka, the wise woman, the one who could cure any illness. At last her mind had purpose again. But beneath the surface of this newfound respect, something darker stirred, a curiosity that edged ever closer to danger. She no longer wanted only to heal. She wanted to understand how thin the line truly was between life and death, and how easily it could be crossed. By the time Aina de Piston, now known to everyone as Baba Anujka, reached her later years, her name had become a symbol of healing and wisdom. In the village of Vladimirovac, people came from miles away to seek her remedies. Whether it was a fever, a cough, or heartbreak, there was a bottle on her shelf for everything. Inside her dimly lit laboratory, glass jars lined the walls, and the air was heavy with the scent of dried herbs and boiled roots. The faint flicker of oil lamps cast long shadows across her table, a table where miracles were made. And sometimes something much darker. At first, her medicine seemed harmless. She treated villagers with mixtures of herbs, water, and natural extracts. Her cures often worked, and her reputation grew stronger. People began calling her the village chemist, a woman whose knowledge went beyond ordinary understanding. But behind that gentle smile and quiet composure, a silent transformation had begun. Baba Anujka had started experimenting again, not just with plants, but with chemicals and poisons. She had become fascinated by substances that could alter the body, slow the heartbeat, numb the nerves, or stop breathing altogether. The difference between medicine and poison, she realized, was only a matter of proportion. A few drops healed. A few more could kill. And soon, that dangerous knowledge found its purpose. One day, a woman came to her with a confession. She was miserable, trapped in an abusive marriage, and desperate to escape. The woman begged for something, anything, to end her suffering. And that's when Baba Anujka gave her a small vial of what she called magic water. She said it was a spiritual potion, something that would cleanse her life of negativity. But it wasn't magic. It was poison. At first, the woman hesitated, but desperation is a powerful force. Days later, her husband fell ill. He complained of stomach pain, weakness, and fever, symptoms that resembled a natural disease. Within a week, he was dead. No one suspected foul play. To the villagers, it was just another tragedy, another soul taken by fate. But for Baba Anujka, it was proof. Her mixture had worked precisely, quietly, invisibly. Word began to spread among the women of the nearby villages. Whispers carried through markets and back streets about a potion that could end suffering without leaving a trace. They started coming to her in secret, often at night, wrapped in shawls and fear. And with every exchange, money changed hands. The magic water became her most expensive and profitable remedy. But what she didn't realize was that she was no longer seen as a healer. To many, she had become a savior, and to others, a silent weapon. Her potion didn't just treat illness. It granted freedom through death. And soon, the number of those who drank her so-called magic water would rise into the hundreds, each victim unknowingly bound to a woman that world would one day call the Witch of Vladimirovac. By the time Aina de Piston, now known to everyone as Baba Anujka, reached her later years, her name had become a symbol of healing and wisdom. In the village of Vladimirovac, people came from miles away to seek her remedies. Whether it was a fever, a cough, or heartbreak, there was a bottle on her shelf for everything. Inside her dimly lit laboratory, glass jars lined the walls, and the air was heavy with the scent of dried herbs and boiled roots. The faint flicker of oil lamps cast long shadows across her table, a table where miracles were made. And sometimes something much darker. At first, her medicine seemed harmless. She treated villagers with mixtures of herbs, water, and natural extracts. Her cures often worked, and her reputation grew stronger. People began calling her the village chemist, a woman whose knowledge went beyond ordinary understanding. But behind that gentle smile and quiet composure, a silent transformation had begun. Baba Anujka had started experimenting again, not just with plants, but with chemicals and poisons. She had become fascinated by substances that could alter the body, slow the heartbeat, numb the nerves, or stop breathing altogether. The difference between medicine and poison, she realized, was only a matter of proportion. A few drops healed. A few more could kill. And soon, that dangerous knowledge found its purpose. One day, a woman came to her with a confession. She was miserable, trapped in an abusive marriage, and desperate to escape. The woman begged for something, anything, to end her suffering. And that's when Baba Anujka gave her a small vial of what she called magic water. She said it was a spiritual potion, something that would cleanse her life of negativity. But it wasn't magic. It was poison. At first, the woman hesitated, but desperation is a powerful force. Days later, her husband fell ill. He complained of stomach pain, weakness, and fever, symptoms that resembled a natural disease. Within a week, he was dead. No one suspected foul play. To the villagers, it was just another tragedy, another soul taken by fate. But for Baba Anujka, it was proof. Her mixture had worked precisely, quietly, invisibly. Word began to spread among the women of the nearby villages. Whispers carried through markets and back streets about a potion that could end suffering without leaving a trace. They started coming to her in secret, often at night, wrapped in shawls and fear. And with every exchange, money changed hands. The magic water became her most expensive and profitable remedy. But what she didn't realize was that she was no longer seen as a healer. To many, she had become a savior, and to others, a silent weapon. Her potion didn't just treat illness. It granted freedom through death. And soon, the number of those who drank her so-called magic water would rise into the hundreds, each victim unknowingly bound to a woman that the world would one day call the Witch of Vladimirovac. By the late 1920s, the name Baba Anujka had spread far beyond the village of Vladimirovac. To some, she was still a healer, a mysterious old woman who mixed herbs and water to cure ailments. To others, she had become something closer to myth, a woman whose potions could change destinies. But every myth, no matter how powerful, eventually begins to crack. And for Baba Anujka, that crack began with a single woman named Stana. Stana had been one of her regular clients. For years, she had bought herbal medicines from the old chemist, swearing by their power. But this time, she came to Baba Anujka with something else in her heart. Not illness, but hatred. She wanted freedom from her husband, a man she claimed treated her like a servant. And so, just like many women before her, she whispered her misery across the wooden counter of Baba's lab. Anujka listened in silence, her wrinkled hands gently tracing the rim of a glass bottle. Finally, she handed Stana a small vial of clear liquid, her infamous magic water. "This will make things right," she said softly. "Give it to him, and peace will return to your home." Days later, Stana's husband fell violently ill. His body weakened, his breath turned shallow, and within a week, he was dead. The village mourned, but no one questioned the cause. People said it must have been his fate, or perhaps a hidden sickness. But Stana's story didn't end there. Just weeks after her husband's funeral, she remarried, this time to a wealthy older man from the same village. A man with land, money, and property. And not long after their wedding, he too grew mysteriously ill. After drinking a potion his new wife had given him, 2 husbands, 2 identical deaths. Too much coincidence for even the quiet countryside to ignore. The whispers began to spread. Locals informed the authorities, and soon, the police opened an investigation. They started quietly, questioning neighbors, checking burial records, and what they uncovered sent shockwaves through the region. One name kept coming up in conversation after conversation: Baba Anujka. When they finally confronted Stana, she broke down. She confessed everything: the meetings, the bottles, the promises. She told them that Baba Anujka had been the one providing the so-called medicine that took her husband's lives. It was 1928 when officers arrived at Baba Anujka's home. They found shelves of vials, powders, and strange mixtures, her secret laboratory still intact. The elderly woman, now 90 years old, was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder. Her trial began the following year, in 1929, and the courtroom was filled with silence as dozens of witnesses came forward. Women spoke about the potions they had bought, the instructions they'd been given, and the men who had died soon after. Baba Anujka denied everything. She claimed she was innocent, that she had been framed by ungrateful women who misunderstood her medicines, but the evidence was undeniable. After months of testimony, the verdict was read on July 6, 1929, life imprisonment. Her age spared her from the death sentence. And so at 91, the witch of Vladimirovac was sent to prison, her legend now forever bound to poison and death. But even behind bars, she never confessed. She spent 7 years in prison before being released for health reasons. And 2 years later, at 100 years old, Baba Anujka finally died, still claiming, "I did nothing wrong." Today, historians remember her as Europe's oldest serial killer, a woman who turned chemistry into a weapon and healing into horror. When the cold winter of 1938 settled over the Serbian countryside, the village of Vladimirovac grew quiet once more. In a modest house on the edge of the fields, an old woman took her final breath, her hands still stained by years of mixing, measuring, and whispering promises over glass vials. Her name was Baba Anujka, and she was 100 years old. For the villagers, her death marked the end of an era. But for history, it was only the beginning of her legend. Even today, people in that region speak of her in hushed tones. Some say she was a healer who went too far, a woman of science trapped in a world that feared her knowledge. Others call her a cold-hearted killer, who used her chemistry not to cure, but to control. Whatever the truth, Baba Anujka blurred the line between medicine and murder, between salvation and sin. Her so-called magic water became a symbol of something much darker, the invisible poison that hides beneath trust. For years, women had come to her seeking relief, but what she gave them was not peace, only silence. One by one, the men of the villages fell, their deaths disguised as illness, their killers protected by secrecy. And in that quiet exchange, between pain and revenge, Anujka had found her purpose. Historians later described her as Europe's oldest serial killer, a woman responsible for over 100 deaths, though some believe the number was far higher. Her crimes were not crimes of passion. They were calculated, careful, and disguised beneath the veil of faith and respect. Each victim drank willingly, believing they were taking a cure, a tragic irony that defined her entire life's work. But perhaps what made her story truly terrifying wasn't the poison itself. It was the trust she commanded, how people came to her with hope in their hearts and left carrying death in their hands. She was proof that evil doesn't always wear a monster's face. Sometimes it smiles gently and speaks with compassion. After her release from prison, neighbors claimed she lived quietly until her final days, still insisting on her innocence. Some said she spent her last nights talking to the bottles lined on her shelves, as if speaking to old friends. Others believed she never truly stopped mixing potions, that even in her frailty, the witch of Vladimirovac was still searching for the perfect formula, one that could cleanse her conscience, or perhaps cheat death itself. Today, her story stands as both a mystery and a warning, a reminder that power, when left unchecked, can twist even the purest intentions, and that behind every miracle we seek, there might be a price we cannot see. Because sometimes the real danger isn't in the bottle, it's in the hands that pour it. If you enjoy stories like this, then don't forget to subscribe. Your one click helps us keep uncovering the truth.